Hassan Veller, hands on the desk and do not touch those procedure files.
Wait, what is happening? Why are you...
The surgery is billed under your name that never happened.
This is a joke, right? Somebody put
Once is a billing error, twice is suspicious. Dr. Hassan Vellery did this 130 times across 4 years and left a fabricated operative report for every single one.
We put you up to this.
A rotator cuff repair billed for a patient who was only here for follow-up.
No, that's impossible. There's no way you're talking about me. I don't even...
He would not be able to explain it away. Within 72 hours, federal agents would seize 4 years of billing records, 97 fabricated operative reports, and the laptop containing the template file he used to generate them. 130 phantom procedures, 60 patients, $4.5 million billed to Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurers for surgeries that never happened. The paperwork Dr. Hassan Vellery had trusted to protect him became the paperwork that would end his career, his freedom, and his medical license. The number you just heard, $4.5 million, sit with that for a second. Now think about the fact that not one of those surgeries actually happened. If that shocks you, drop your reaction in the comments, and subscribe if you're new here. The full story is worse than the headline suggests. Hassan Nikhil Vellery was born in 1974 in Hyderabad, in the south of India, the older of 2 sons in a family that valued education above nearly everything else. His father, Rajan Vellery, was a hospital pharmacist. His mother, Priya, taught mathematics at a private secondary school. In 1982, when Hassan was 8 years old, the family emigrated to Edison, New Jersey, joining a community of South Asian professionals who had been arriving in Central Jersey since the immigration reforms of the late 1960s. Rajan took a position at a chain pharmacy on Oak Tree Road. Priya, whose Indian teaching credentials did not transfer, spent 3 years earning her New Jersey certification and eventually taught middle school algebra in the same public school district her sons would attend. The family lived in a 2-bedroom rental apartment for nearly a decade before saving enough for a modest split-level house in Iselin. Hassan was, by every account, the model immigrant son. Straight A's at John P. Stevens High School, captain of the debate team, president of the Indian Students Association, National Merit Scholar. His yearbook quote, borrowed from Freud, read, "Anatomy is destiny." In Hassan's case, it read less like literature and more like a career declaration. He had told his parents at age 11 that he wanted to be a doctor. He did not deviate from that plan for a single semester. He enrolled at Rutgers University in 1992 as a pre-med biology major. He worked in a molecular biology lab under a professor who wrote him a recommendation letter describing him as the most disciplined undergraduate researcher I have supervised in 22 years. He graduated summa cum laude in 1996. He took the MCAT that spring and scored in the 97th percentile. Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia accepted him with a partial scholarship. His medical school evaluations use the same handful of phrases in different combinations. Meticulous documentation, strong technical aptitude, communicates effectively with patients from diverse backgrounds, showed early interest in surgical subspecialties. A cadaver lab instructor noted in his second-year review that Hassan was unusually comfortable with the discipline required to reconstruct anatomy from limited landmarks. That comfort would eventually prove relevant. He matched into orthopedic surgery at the Cleveland Clinic in 2000, one of the most competitive residency slots in the country. He completed 5 years of general orthopedic residency, followed by a 1-year sports medicine fellowship at the Hospital for Special Surgery in Manhattan. During his fellowship year, he met Aparna Chandran, a pediatric hospitalist at Columbia, at a mutual friend's wedding in Queens. They married in 2007 in a 2-day ceremony that combined Hindu rites with a Manhattan reception. Their daughter Mira was born in 2009. Their son Rohan followed in 2011. In the summer of 2011, Hassan accepted a partnership track position at Crest Point Medical Group, a multi-specialty physician practice headquartered in Crest Point, Virginia, 30 miles west of Richmond. The salary was competitive. The partnership timeline was 3 years. The practice held admitting and surgical privileges at Crest Point Regional Hospital, the largest hospital in a 4-county service area, and Hassan would inherit an established patient panel from a retiring senior partner. He and Aparna bought a 5-bedroom colonial on 2 acres in a suburb called Highland Chase. Mira and Rohan started at the local Montessori. Hassan joined the Central Virginia South Asian Cricket League. On paper, and in every meaningful way, he had arrived. American healthcare runs on documentation. Every surgical procedure a physician performs generates a chain of records so extensive it is designed, in theory, to be impossible to fake. An orthopedic surgeon who performs a rotator cuff repair generates an operative report authored by the surgeon himself. Anesthesia documentation authored by the anesthesiologist. Nursing notes from the circulating nurse in the operating room. A pathology record if any tissue was removed and sent for analysis. Hospital scheduling records showing that the operating room was booked, staffed, and used. Post-operative orders. Recovery room notes. Insurance authorization records. Each of these records is generated by a different person in a different department, using a different information system. In principle, all 6 or 7 of them must converge on the same procedure, performed on the same patient, on the same date, in the same operating room. Divergence between them is supposed to be structurally impossible to sustain. That is the theory. The theory holds when a surgeon works at a single hospital, and every record he generates is countersigned by staff he does not control. It breaks in a specific circumstance. It breaks when a surgeon has independent control over his own procedure documentation, and when the insurance carrier's default posture is to trust that documentation without cross-checking it against the hospital's parallel records. That is exactly the circumstance in which Hassan Vellore practiced. Crest Point Medical Group was a physician-owned practice. Physicians authored their own operative reports, dictating them into a transcription system that produced clean-typed documents for insurance submission. The practice's billing department, 3 coders, and a billing supervisor coded the procedures based on the reports the physicians provided. The billing supervisor's job was to check for coding accuracy, not to verify that the procedures had occurred. That verification was outside her professional scope, and frankly, outside anyone's professional scope at the practice. The insurance carriers, Medicare, Medicaid, Anthem, Cigna, United, processed the claims based on the operative reports submitted. They spot-checked claims through periodic audits. But routine claim adjudication did not involve calling the hospital to confirm that the operating room booking actually existed. It did not involve comparing the surgeon's report against the anesthesiologist's record. It relied, structurally, on the assumption that the operative report was truthful, because operative reports had always been truthful, because it was inconceivable that they would not be. 13 years into his practice, Hassan Vellore understood every seam of this system. He understood which patients generated operative report scrutiny and which did not. He understood which insurance plans mailed patient-facing operative summaries and which mailed only a coded EOB. He understood the tolerance the practice's billing department had for procedure volume. He understood, most importantly, that the one record he did not control, the hospital's parallel documentation, was also the record no one thought to check. The first phantom procedure was billed on March 14, 2020. A Saturday during the first week of the pandemic-era shutdown of elective surgeries in Virginia. Elective orthopedic volume had collapsed. Hassan's income was tied to procedure volume. The practice's partnership distributions, which represented roughly 40% of his annual compensation, were projected to fall by nearly 2/3 for the year. The patient was a 58-year-old woman named Constance Bellamy, a Medicare beneficiary who had been Hassan's patient for 4 years for chronic shoulder pain. On March 14th, Hassan authored an operative report describing a right shoulder rotator cuff repair he claimed to have performed the previous day. He submitted the report to the practice's billing department on Monday morning. The claim was submitted to Medicare that afternoon. Medicare paid approximately $41,000. Constance Bellamy did not know a surgery had been billed against her name. Her Medicare EOB summarized the claim as surgical procedure, right shoulder, and listed a patient responsibility of $0. She filed it in the drawer where she filed all of her Medicare paperwork. She had not been in an operating room that year. The method Hassan developed over the following months was clinical in its precision. He selected patients from his existing panel who fit a specific profile. Chronic orthopedic patients with treatment histories that already included documented procedures, so that additional procedures would appear contextually plausible. Patients on Medicare, Medicaid, or one of two commercial plans whose EOBs did not include operative report summaries. Patients whose payment relationship to the practice was managed entirely by their insurance carrier, so that no patient-facing bill would ever be generated. He did not target self-pay patients. He did not target patients whose insurance plans mailed detailed procedural summaries. He did not target patients whose conditions did not already justify some plausible surgical intervention. For each phantom procedure, he generated a fabricated operative report using a template file he maintained on his personal laptop. The template contained standard operative language for the most commonly billed orthopedic CPT codes: arthroscopic rotator cuff repair, meniscal repair, a CL reconstruction, hardware removal, joint debridement. He populated the template with patient-specific details drawn from the actual clinical encounter. The patient's demographics, medical history, previous imaging, and current complaints. The result was an operative report that read as though the surgery had occurred. It contained the patient's real medical history. It described a procedure consistent with the patient's real orthopedic condition. It cited real imaging findings. Only the surgery itself was fabricated. He submitted the reports through the practice's normal billing workflow. The coders coded. The billing supervisor reviewed for coding accuracy. The claims went out. The payments came in. In 2020, Hassan billed 19 phantom procedures, totaling approximately $680,000. In 2021, he billed 34. In 2022, 41. In 2023, 36. The escalation was steady, but disciplined. He did not bill more procedures than his legitimate surgical volume could plausibly explain. He kept his total procedure count within the range a busy orthopedic surgeon might reasonably claim. He simply mixed phantom procedures in among his real ones, at a rate that no automated volume analysis would flag. The additional income showed up in his lifestyle in modest, deliberate ways. The family took a 2-week vacation to the Amalfi Coast in the summer of 2021. Aparna's Lexus was upgraded to a new BMW X7. The house was refinished. New kitchen, new primary bath, a screened porch added to the back. Mira's college fund grew. Rohan started private lessons with a nationally ranked squash coach. Nothing about the family's spending pattern would have looked out of place for a surgeon at Hassan's career stage. He knew that too. His colleagues at the practice noticed nothing. His billing supervisor, a woman named Charmaine Dokes, who had worked at Crestpoint for 11 years, noticed nothing. His office staff noticed nothing. The hospital OR staff, who saw him on his legitimate operating days, noticed nothing. Every record on his side of the paperwork was internally consistent. Every dollar he collected was signed for by a paper trail he had authored himself. On February 3, 2024, a 54-year-old woman named Margaret Ellenson sat down at her kitchen table in Manassas, Virginia, with a stack of documents she had assembled for her accountant. Margaret was self-employed, ran a small graphic design business, and itemized her medical expenses on her federal return every year. Her preparation ritual involved sorting through the year's explanation of benefits notices and cross-referencing them against her calendar to confirm which dates corresponded to which appointments. Margaret had been a patient of Dr. Hassan Valori since 2019. She had chronic degenerative changes in her right knee. She had undergone an arthroscopic partial meniscectomy in 2020, and she saw Dr. Valori every 6 months for follow-up and cortisone injections. She trusted him. He had explained her imaging to her carefully. He had been patient during her recovery. She had recommended him to 2 friends. On the 11th EOB in her stack, dated October 2023, Margaret found a claim she did not recognize. Crestpoint Medical Group had billed her insurance, Anthem Blue Cross, for a procedure coded as arthroscopic meniscal repair, right knee. The date of service was October 6, 2023. The amount billed was $38,200. Anthem's paid amount, after network adjustment, was $19,800. Margaret pulled her calendar. October 6, 2023 was a Friday. She had been at Crest Point Medical Group that day. She had a note in her calendar that read, Dr. V, 3 p.m., follow-up injection. She remembered the appointment. She had driven herself, received a cortisone shot in her right knee, iced it in the exam room for 15 minutes, and driven home. She had not been in an operating room. She had not had surgery. She had walked into the parking lot on her own 2 legs and driven her own car back to Manassas. She read the EOB 3 times. She checked the date. She checked the CPT code. She checked her calendar again. She called Anthem's member services line the following morning. The Anthem representative told her the claim had been processed and paid based on an operative report submitted by Dr. Vellery. Margaret asked if she could see the report. The representative escalated her to the fraud unit. A senior fraud investigator named Priscilla Wentworth called Margaret back within 4 hours and asked her to file a formal complaint. Margaret filed it that afternoon. She also, on Priscilla's suggestion, called the Medicare fraud reporting line to file a parallel complaint, though her insurance was commercial rather than federal. The commercial fraud complaint would have moved slowly on its own. The Medicare tip was flagged and forwarded within 72 hours to the Healthcare Fraud Strike Force, operating out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia. The Office of Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services opened a targeted billing review of Dr. Hassan Vellery the following week. He would not learn of the investigation for another 9 months. We're heading into the investigation now. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't gloss over the paper trail. Subscribe if you want to see exactly how the government builds a case like this one. We break down every document, every record, every dollar. The OIG investigator assigned to the case was a former hospital compliance officer named Deborah Lansing, who had spent 14 years auditing surgical billing before joining the federal government. Lansing understood, as few investigators do, that a surgical procedure generates a parallel documentary universe. She did not begin with Dr. Vellery's records. She began with the hospitals. Her first records request went to Crest Point Regional Hospital, seeking every operating room record for every date on which Dr. Vellery had billed a surgical procedure over the past 4 years. She requested OR scheduling logs, anesthesia records, nursing notes, surgical pathology submissions, and post-operative orders. She requested the same records for every Vellery patient identified in the billing data. The hospital complied within 30 days. Lansing sat down in her office in Alexandria with a print binder from the hospital on one side of her desk and a spreadsheet of Vellery's Medicare and Medicaid claims on the other. The comparison was, by design, mechanical. For each billed procedure, she asked one question. Does the hospital have any parallel record that this operation occurred? For the majority of Vellery's billed procedures, the answer was yes. The OR was scheduled. The anesthesia record existed. The nursing notes were on file. The pathology sample, where applicable, had been logged. These were the real surgeries. She set them aside. For approximately 130 billed procedures, the answer was no. No OR booking. No anesthesia record, no nursing notes, no pathology, nothing. In some cases, the hospital's records showed that doctor. Vellery had been in the building on the billed date, but performing a different, legitimate procedure on a different patient, in a different operating room, at a time that did not overlap with the billed phantom procedure. In other cases, he had not been in the hospital at all on the date of the claimed surgery. Lansing built a single exhibit. Column A listed the patient's name and date of service. Column B listed the CPT code Vellery had billed and the amount he had collected. Column C listed the operative report he had submitted to substantiate the claim. Column D listed the hospital's parallel record, or in 130 rows, the absence of one. She titled the exhibit, Comparative Analysis of Billed Procedures versus Hospital Surgical Records. She printed it single-sided, and it ran 47 pages. The Strikeforce prosecutor, an assistant U.S. attorney named Vernon Kilbrick, opened her file for the first time and told her, on the phone, that it was the cleanest healthcare fraud case he had ever seen. Every phantom procedure was documented. Every fabricated operative report was preserved. Every dollar collected was traceable. And the hospital's records, the one set of documents Valerie did not control, proved a negative that surgical billing fraud usually cannot prove. The surgeries had not happened. A search warrant was drafted. Kilbrick took it to a federal magistrate on November 8, 2024. It was signed the same afternoon. The warrant covered Valerie's practice office, his home in Highland Chase, and every electronic device associated with either. The interviews began before the warrant was executed. A cooperating witness, the retired coding manager who had preceded Charmaine Dokes at Crest Point, provided testimony describing the practice's documentation workflow. 2 former nurse practitioners in Valerie's department were interviewed. Neither had knowledge of the phantom procedures, but both confirmed the internal architecture of the practice's billing pipeline. Charmaine Dokes herself, when interviewed on November 15th, cooperated fully and provided the coder's internal notes. The final piece was Valerie's laptop. On November 22nd, 2024, federal agents entered the Valerie home at 6:15 in the morning. They found Hassan in his home study in a bathrobe, drinking chai, reading a medical journal. His wife Aparna was upstairs. Their daughter Mira was home from Duke for the Thanksgiving break. The laptop was on the desk. The template file, labeled op_templates_vi4.docx, was open. It contained 97 fabricated operative reports in various stages of completion, organized by patient and date of service. It was the only document he had never intended anyone to see. At 6:40 in the morning on November 22nd, 2024, the lead FBI agent, a woman named Renata Coyle, who had spent 7 years on the healthcare fraud strike force, stood in the doorway of Hassan Valerie's home study. He had not moved from the leather armchair where the entry team had first found him. His chai had gone cold in the mug on the side table. The medical journal, an issue of the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery, was still open across his knee. Coyle read him his rights. She informed him that the search warrant covered every device in the residence and every record at his practice office. She told him that federal agents were, at that moment, executing the same warrant at Crest Point Medical Group. Coyle asked him if he was willing to speak with her. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I would like to know," he said, "what specifically I am being investigated for." Coyle told him, healthcare fraud, false statements relating to healthcare matters, aggravated identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud. She listed the statutes. She told him the investigation had been open for 11 months. She told him the OIG had already completed the comparative analysis of his billing records against the hospital's surgical documentation. There was a long pause. "I would like to call my attorney," he said. "That is your right." "I would also like," he said, and his voice was very calm, "to say that I am aware of what you have found. I would like the record to reflect that I did not intend for anyone to be hurt." Coyle asked him if he was making a statement. "I am acknowledging," he said, "that I understand why you are here." Those were the last words Hassan Valerie would speak to a federal agent without an attorney present. He asked for the phone. He called an attorney in Richmond. He said nothing else. The agents completed the search. The laptop, 7 external drives, 3 years of paper records, and a manila folder from his desk drawer containing handwritten notes about billing volume were removed from the home. The federal grand jury for the Eastern District of Virginia returned an indictment against Dr. Hassan Nikhil Valerie on December 18, 2024. The indictment contained 43 counts, 20 counts of healthcare fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1347, 11 counts of making false statements relating to healthcare matters under 18 U.S.C. Section 1035. 6 counts of aggravated identity theft under 18 U.S.C. Section 1028A, based on the use of Medicare beneficiary identifiers in the phantom claims. 6 additional counts of mail and wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. sections 1341 and 1343. Valori retained a defense team led by a Richmond-based white-collar attorney named Beatrice Summersby. Summersby was experienced. She read the government's evidence. She read the comparative analysis. She read the template file. She met with her client for 6 hours over the course of 2 days and delivered to him, in the plainest possible language, an assessment that trial would not save him. Valori pleaded guilty on February 24, 2025, to 1 count of healthcare fraud, 1 count of aggravated identity theft, and 1 count of making false statements, with the remaining counts to be dismissed at sentencing per the plea agreement. He allocuted in open court. He acknowledged that he had submitted claims for procedures he had not performed. He acknowledged that he had generated the operative reports to substantiate those claims. He acknowledged that the total loss to federal payers and commercial insurers was approximately $4.5 million. Sentencing was scheduled for June 11, 2025. The victim impact submissions were unusual for a healthcare fraud case. Margaret Ellenson, the patient whose EOB had begun the investigation, submitted a written statement. She wrote this: "I trusted this man with my body. When I learned what he had done, I did not know at first whether to feel violated, foolish, or complicit. I have come to understand that what he did was not just a theft of money from insurance companies. It was a theft of the medical record itself. There are now, in the files that document my life, procedures that did not happen. I cannot get those files clean." The judge, the Honorable Ellsworth Redwine, read her statement aloud from the bench before pronouncing sentence. "Dr. Valori," Judge Redwine said, "the profession of medicine rests on a covenant. That covenant is not primarily contractual. It is documentary. Every physician in this country who authors an operative report does so under an implicit oath that the report describes something that occurred. Every insurance carrier, every hospital, every court, every colleague, every patient, all of them proceed on the assumption that a physician's written record of a surgical procedure is a truthful record of a surgical procedure. You violated that covenant 130 times over 4 years. You did so with a template file. You did so with clinical precision. You did so, the evidence shows, with a full awareness of exactly which patients and which insurance plans would fail to detect the theft. This was not a lapse. This was a system. The sentence, 120 months in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. 10 years. Restitution in the amount of $4 million.